thinking that if the Rangers ended up losing to the freaking Flyers after the Flyers haven't played for 11 days and we're missing 6 starters, 6 really good players, I was going to be ticked off, although the Rangers are missing a number of good players too. But they won, so I am happy this morning.
Great.
They got the 2 points, although they gave up a point. But you know what's going to happen? We're at the quarter pole of this NHL season. What's going to happen is that all these teams are playing each other. And these things are going to come down to the last 10 to 15 games, these divisions are. And because they're going to just beat each other. And, you know, the Devils win a great game last night, but then again, the Islanders lose a bad game last night to the Penguins. So it's going to be like this all season long. There are going to be frustrating stretches, just like the Rangers hopefully are coming out of. And last night they should have won the game in regulation, probably 5-6-1. I mean, they had about 7 point-blank shots, and Carter Hart, the goalie for Philadelphia, was great and frustrating for us as Ranger fans. But nonetheless, we come away with the 2 points. So I am happy this Friday morning, and it's great. It's a great day, and that's all that matters. And by the way, if you are a Nets fan, you have to be really happy, too, because your team just absolutely destroyed the Lakers last night. I only saw the highlights this morning. I didn't stay up and watch the game, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you and break it all down. I'm just going to tell you I read about it. I saw the highlights. And then reading the comments from the players after the game, and, of course, Steve Nash, they always start with defense. And it seems like everybody, according to Kyrie Irving, is connected now, and they all understand what they're supposed to be doing. And they go out there and they just hammer the Lakers in their building for a 5-game win streak now.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly the matchup, the clash of the Titans that we all wanted to see with a healthy Lakers team and a healthy Nets team. Of course, Kevin Durant not playing, Anthony Davis not playing, Dennis Schroeder has been a huge deal for the Lakers after acquiring him this offseason, not playing. But this, I don't want to poo-poo the Nets win last night against the Lakers because they did play well defensively. Rebounding has been much better for them. They're just looking like a different team that is figuring it out. But we need to see the big three play with one another for an extended stretch and look like a championship team. And we haven't seen a lot of that for one reason or another. Kyrie disappearing. Kevin Durant's got COVID issues. He's got a hamstring issue. James Harden not being on the team early on because he was trying to get his way out of Houston. You know, all of those things have led to these guys not playing with one another barely at all. All three of them on the court at the same time. So that's what you really need to see to then declare them the team that's going to come out of the East or a team that's going to win a championship and all these things that we expect to be saying about the Nets. But, you know, last night was a good one for them.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course you can, Boomer.
Is the NBA as simple as who makes their threes and who doesn't make
their
threes? Yeah,
basically, yeah. So, I mean, last night, of course, the Nets so much better than the Lakers. What was it? The Lakers only made 8 threes or something last night.
Yes.
The Nets had made 18 or something.
But it's about that simple, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it is. And sometimes, as we talked about just the other day, you know, people want to point to missed shots and say that, well, it was because of the defense that they were missing shots. And sometimes it's true, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes guys are wide open and they're bricking it, and there's other times there's a hand in the face or they're forcing a shot, you know, towards the end of the shot clock, whatever. But yeah, I mean, the NBA really has turned into a lot of that, where if you make your threes, you're going to win. If you don't make your threes, you're probably going to lose if the other team is making the threes. If you're both not making the threes, then who the hell knows what's going to happen. But, yes, that's sort of what the game is about these days.
Yeah. And last night, if you look at some of those highlights, you'll see that the Nets just were bombing threes and making them, and the Lakers were bricking them. So I don't necessarily know that this would be a finals preview, especially with the way that Utah's playing. But, again, you know, as I was saying yesterday about Utah, I don't know if, you know, can they sustain this? Can they play this good all the way through the season and then get to a 7-game series and play that well through a 7-game series against one of the top teams in the league 3 different times? So that's a question that still has to be answered. But nonetheless, at least the Nets looked like a real team, and they're in the middle of a 5-game winning streak, and Kevin Durant has not been a part of it.
No, he hasn't. And to me, you make sure – you got Kyrie Irving back last night. James Harden's been playing out of his mind. The team is playing well. They're on a winning streak. There's absolutely no reason to not take as much time as possible to get Kevin Durant healthy. So, I mean, healthy for the playoffs. Those three guys healthy for the playoffs is what matters. The same thing with Anthony Davis, as the Lakers actually got some bad news about him, so it's definitely going to be at least 4 weeks, and there's a calf strain on top of the Achilles stuff. So that's all these teams really care about, is making sure that you go into the postseason regardless of what seed you are, because really, what does that matter? Regardless of what seed you are, as healthy as possible. So even if Kevin Durant feels 100%, give him an extra day or two to make sure that he comes back and he's healthy, because there's just absolutely no reason to mess around.
Yeah, you know what's amazing is that the NBA, I haven't seen a lot of it. I know that there's been some of it, and we've been exposed to it here with Kevin Durant, the whole COVID-19 situation. The NBA hasn't been nearly as impacted as the NHL has been. You know, the Rangers have just played 2 teams. One didn't play for 15 days, the Devils.
Yeah. And
the other one, the Flyers, hadn't played for 11 days. And the Flyers were missing 6 of their players. And the Flyers are playing in the outdoor series in Lake Tahoe this weekend. And they play the Boston Bruins. So there's going to be 2 games out there in Lake Tahoe because they couldn't play up in Canada. There was no stadium series this year, so they created this outdoor series that's going to be played at that Century Club golf course where they play that celebrity tournament out there.
Yeah.
And it's going to be beautiful. I don't necessarily know if there are going to be any fans at the game or any of that stuff. But
is that the picture that I saw yesterday? It had an outdoor sheet of ice that was circulating around the internet.
I don't know what picture you looked at, but that's where they're playing this weekend. So.
I think I did. Yeah, I think CeeLo might actually put that out there yesterday.
Right. So there's 4 teams playing out there, and I just. I think it's great that the NHL is doing it. There'll be some interest, and it's kind of like a lazy sports weekend, so might as well check it out. We got the golf tournament at Riviera Country Club this weekend. There's not a lot going on, so that would be pretty interesting to watch. Now, yesterday, and we talked about this yesterday, that I told you the Colts were holding fast on what they were offering the Philadelphia Eagles for Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
And the reason they were holding fast is nobody else was really offering anything. Everybody was thinking that the Bears were offering something, and the Bears weren't even involved. And, it was just that came out of the media, in Chicago.
Media-driven narratives.
Yeah, well, kind of like, because they think that they're looking for a new quarterback. And, my suggestion for the Bears would be stick with Mitch Trubisky. Don't bring in Carson Wentz. The Carson Wentz is going to the right spot. And I'm happy for my buddy Frank, and he and I were texting yesterday, and he sent me a text, and I didn't even realize this, and it's something that really tells you why Frank wanted Carson. And it goes back to when Frank was coaching him. And, he reminded me of my own failings as a quarterback in the NFL in conjunction to Carson Wentz, and I'll tell you how.
I'm sure you appreciated that.
Well, it's all right, but then again, we have honest conversations, which is good. Mm-hmm. Frank said in 2017 through 2019, Carson Wentz threw 81 touchdown passes, and he only threw 21 interceptions. He believes that 2020 was an outlier, and I'm not saying anything that isn't already been reported out there. I've said that Frank loved Carson when he was coming out of college. I remember when he went to go work him out, and he called me on his way back to the airport saying, "I can't believe this kid isn't thought of as Andrew Luck coming out of North Dakota." So that's how well how strongly he feels about him. He goes on to say, you were an NFL MVP and you never had a 3-year span in your career where you had a TD to interception ratio of 4.1. I was like, okay.
Yeah, thanks Frank. I appreciate that.
Jeez. Thanks, Frank. I played more games than you did. You were a backup. How about that?
Yeah, I know. You had your nice little moment there in the comeback in Buffalo, but outside of that, you're a footnote, Frank. So I appreciate you checking in.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, well, you should have.
Say that. Well,
yeah.
But these are kind of the honest conversations we were having. So. What were the alternatives, and what are the alternatives for the Colts when it came to quarterback? There really was only one. I guess they probably could have pried Nick Foles out of Chicago if they really tried very hard, but he's not a long-term solution at starter. And the good news for the Colts is they're actually paying Carson Wentz about $100 million over 4 years. And not a lot of that is guaranteed. So most of the guarantees have already been paid by the Eagles. There's going to be a roster bonus that's going to be coming due. That's one of the reasons why the Eagles wanted to do this rather quickly. They didn't want to pay that $10 million roster bonus this year. The Colts, Carson's salary is about $15 million this year. So that's $25 million for a quarterback. That's exactly what they paid Phillip Rivers last year. So the money aspect and I think the fact that Carson has 4 years left in his contract was very appealing to the Colts. And I know it's appealing to Frank from a player standpoint, and Frank believes. And this will be a great test for Frank. If he gets the best out of him, his reputation will continue to grow as a coach.
Yeah.
And the Colts, I think, believe, and I think the players believe that they have, a guy that's going to be good enough to get them to the playoffs last year, notwithstanding.
So basically, they did get a first-round pick back for him unless Carson Wentz ends up getting benched or hurt. So this was the reaction to this trade yesterday was interesting to me because, one, everybody was like, wait a second, third-round pick and a second-round pick for Carson Wentz? I mean, that's ridiculous. He didn't get anything back. Well, if Carson Wentz is, unless I've read this wrong, all he has to do is play 75% of the snaps in 2021, and that pick becomes a first-rounder the next year, right?
If he plays 75% of the snaps,
yeah,
and they don't go to the playoffs, it becomes the number one. Or if he plays 70% of the snaps and they go to the playoffs. And the reason that isn't the reason that is in there is because Carson Wentz has had a history of getting hurt.
Yeah, I understand.
So the Colts and if they go to the playoffs and the Colts give up a first round pick, you're thinking that it's going to be 28 or higher.
Yeah.
It's not. When I say higher, I don't mean higher. In the draft order, it's going to be higher than the number 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, somewhere around there. Would that be that pick if he turns out to be the player that Frank hopefully can unlock again?
To me, it was fair compensation. I mean, I heard both sides of it, like, the Colts exposed themselves to giving up a first-round pick for Carson Wentz. That's ridiculous. Or the Eagles didn't get enough back. Look at the Matthew Stafford deal as compared to Carson Wentz. To me, it was totally fair compensation. Whereas, okay, if Carson Wentz is working out and he's playing and he's starting for the Colts and that turns out to be a first-round pick, a late first-round pick, then obviously you got yourself a starting quarterback at a pretty decent return and a young guy that has worked before with the head coach. Like, that's fine from a Colts perspective. And then from the Eagles perspective, I mean, they were trading damaged goods. I mean, we had talked about, we all remember Carson Wentz in an MVP season before getting hurt in that Super Bowl year. But, after that, the guy has been either hurt or terrible. And that's the way it's been. Now, I doesn't mean that I think he's going to be bad in Indianapolis. I actually think it may work out for him if he stays healthy.
He'll have a much better team around him.
Yeah, right. And a much better offensive line and not a team in turmoil and all these things. I get it. But for everybody to think that, like, the Eagles got fleeced somehow in trading Carson Wentz for what they got. He was a nothing, looked at as a nothing player who got benched last year, and they still ended up getting what they got for it. So to me, this was fair compensation both ways.
Right, and the Colts had no choice because they didn't have a quarterback, and they don't have a high enough draft pick to start over with one of the better quarterbacks that maybe you could start your season with and get a winning performance out of one of these guys. He wanted, and I understand it, he wanted a veteran quarterback who knows his system, who he knows, who he's personally friends with, and has a lot of respect for the way that he plays. And now for Carson, he gets what he wants. Now, here's the other part of this whole thing. He wanted out of Philadelphia.
Sure.
Let's not lose sight of that. So here's another player that wanted to get out of what he considered a bad situation for him. And I think the Philadelphia Eagles felt that they needed to move on from him, too. So this seems to be very similar to the Matthew Stafford trade, meaning that they traded him to where ultimately he wanted to go. Now, the reason they did that is because it's really the only team that offered them the best form of compensation, plus they get him out of the conference.
Yeah.
So that's another good thing for the Eagles. But I just, look, at the end of the day, it's cost certainty for the Colts. They have a 4-year quarterback at $25 million a year. They know that. They have to redo Darius Leonard's contract. They have to redo Quentin Nelson's contract, and they got to redo their right tackle's contract, Braden Smith. They also need a new left tackle because their left tackle has retired. So, there's some issues out there, and I think the Colts, for the most part, protected themselves this year in terms of their draft.
Yeah.
The first-round pick will be next year, and if Carson plays well, it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be
great
a
for them.
low first-round pick.
Yeah, they're going to love that. Now, tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm open to being wrong on this, but I saw a lot of people trying to make a connection locally about what this means for Sam Darnold now that Carson Wentz gets traded. And I just don't see a comparison. So how can you say that Sam Darnold's situation with the Jets is similar to Carson Wentz with the Eagles? Now, they're both quarterbacks, and they both have an injury history. But Sam Darnold never was as good as Carson Wentz was in his career. Sam Darnold also hasn't gotten a contract yet, which is the biggest part of this. And also, the Indianapolis Colts traded for a guy, and you saw what the compensation was. I mean, the Jets are also in a position where, they've got the number 2 overall pick to either take a quarterback or trade it to upgrade the position. Just because Sam Darnold ended up, or rather Carson Wentz ended up getting traded for what he got traded for, you can't now just say, well, this is what the market's going to be for Sam Darnold. I don't see a comparison there between the two guys outside of the two things that I said. They both play quarterback, and they both missed a lot of games.
Right. Well, no, there's no question to me that Carson would be worth more than Sam Darnold on the open market. And I think we saw what the compensation is going to be, especially when it does come to playoffs and amount of playing time, which tells you that everybody's worried about whether or not Carson's going to make it through 16 games. I could say the same thing about Sam Darnold. That's why maybe a second-round pick is the most you're going to get from him. And that's why when you're sitting in Joe Douglas's office right now, you have 3 decisions you can make. You can try and go get Deshaun Watson. Okay, that could be your number 1 goal, is to try to extract Deshaun Watson from Houston. Your number 2 thing would be, let's trade Sam Darnold and let's draft a kid number 2. Let's say it's Zach Wilson out of BYU. Let's go get Zach Wilson out of BYU at number 2 and then trade Sam Darnold. Or the final option is, let's keep Sam Darnold. Let's put him in Mike LaFleur's offense under Rob Saleh's defense, and let's change the way we're doing things to see if we can support him. And then let's add pieces around him with all the draft capital that we have. So those are your 3 decisions if you're Joe Douglas and you're sitting there trying to, navigate through all of that right now and going back and forth with your scouts, going back and forth with your coaching staff, and really finding out whether or not they are comfortable moving forward with Sam Darnold, or do they go and get Deshaun Watson, or do they trade, or do they draft a kid and then trade Sam Darnold? Yeah, that's basically your options.
Right, and it really all comes down to how available is Deshaun Watson from the Texans. Are we to believe that they're really going to stick it to him and fine him and force him to show up? Because if we don't believe that, and we think that Deshaun Watson at some point is going to get traded by the Texans, then you absolutely can't draft a quarterback. In that spot, I think you hang on to Sam Darnold, you wait it out, you see where that whole thing goes, and then if you have to trade you have to trade for Deshaun Watson, you trade for Deshaun Watson. Now, the thing that's tough about it is, okay, then if it's after the draft, you've already used your number 2 overall pick, and you can't trade that.
They're going to want to do it before the draft if they can. The question is, what kind of roster bonuses, what kind of bonuses does Deshaun Watson get in 2021? So right now, he gets a signing bonus of $5.4 million over the next 3 years. So that would be, that's 15. That's about $16.2 million over the next 3 years. He gets as a signing bonus. And then in 2023, on top of the 3 signing bonuses that he will have received between 21, 22, and 23, he'll get a $17 million roster bonus.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So, you have to take into account all these bonuses, how they're going to be paid out. His guaranteed money is $110 million, a little bit more than that. So, the question is if Houston's going to make a trade, they're going to want to do this before, I would think that they have to pay any of this other extra bonus money. So it'll be interesting to see what Nick Caserio and the Houston Texans decide here before the new league starts. Because I'm trying to think when I'm assuming these signing bonuses are paid out once the new league starts.
Which is the March date when free agency opens?
It's about 3.5 weeks.
Is it 17th or 15th this year? It's somewhere in there.
Yeah. So it's 3.5 weeks from now.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the red bell so you're notified when we have new content.